To be here with you, all of you today on this nice sunny afternoon. Being able to listen to uplifting music, hear uplifting stories about this place that we live and we love, and our own little slice of paradise, you know, that place that we call our home. And there are a lot of really good stories about that. A lot of storytellers tell us about their ancestors. They tell us about events that occurred, and we hear those. But today, the story that I have to tell, and actually I guess was been on my mind for a long time, is not one of those stories. This is a story of darkness. This is a story that we all know, that who live here over a long period of time. There are some really not very nice things that happen here. And the genesis for this story began a long time ago, began probably, best I can figure, in Chicago, Illinois. And it began in the mind of one man who had a dream one night. And in that dream, what he heard was, "Tell them FOU was here." Now, many of you understand who've lived here for a long time. You know the story of FOU and what happened on the Jasper Bridge several years ago, 1982. Well, what he did was he took that idea and he eventually moved to Jasper, and the idea began to expand and grow into, he sort of made it into a religion. It sort of seemed kind of not very significant at first. Didn't seem, it was just sort of a cute thing, I think, that he was doing. I first became aware when he had a store over on the other side of the square where the bakery is, and the Speckled Frog and along in there. And he had a card on his by his register when I went to check out. It said FOU. And I said, ask him about it. I said, well, what does this mean? You know, he said, well, he told me about the dream that he had, and he said it stands for a lot of things. It stands for foundation of ubiquity. It stands for father of us. It stands for failure of understanding. And he had a whole long list of things that this FOU was an acronym for. And you have to understand, too, that the scene in Jasper at that time was much different than it is now. When this incident occurred, it was on July the 3rd, 1982. The genesis began, FOU's probably in the late 60s, early 70s, somewhere in there, when he had this dream, or as what he referred to as a vision. And he solicited people to come to FOU land, and FOU land was located outside, or just the road, just the other side of the Jasper Cemetery, all the way to the end of it, or somewhere back in that way. I was never there personally. But they advertised for people to come and to be a part of their group. And I remember seeing ads in the newspaper that said, come be with us, you know, we're in constant contact with the Father. And this was a one ad, you know, in the back of the Jasper paper. And they were doing this all over, attracting people to come and to be a part of what turned out to be this cult. Well, there were a couple of people there who took this to an extreme. Their names were Kate and Keith Hagler. And they were followers of FOU and had even taken the acronym, or the name Keith FOU Hagler, or Kate FOU Hagler. And they had a vision in themselves, or some kind of dream in their own mind, that FOU was the Messiah, that he was the one they had talked about in Revelations, the 11th chapter of Revelations, which says there will be two witnesses. These witnesses will prophesy for 1,260 days, and after that time, the beast from the underworld will rise up and kill them. And in 3.5 days, the Spirit of the Lord will come into them, and then they will rise up and stand again. And they believe that. They believe that with all their heart, with all their soul, and with all their mind. And to bring that about, it began, their odyssey began on January the 21st, 1979, which was 1,260 days from July the 3rd, 1982, when this event occurred on the bridge. So they had planned this for a long time. They could not attract any news people to come and interview them, as you might imagine. It's like kind of a little kooky story or something. So what they did was, on that morning, they boarded a bus in Little Rock on its way to Joplin, Missouri. Before they got to Western Grove, they had been sitting in the back of the bus. Keith gets up from the back of the bus, walks up to the front, pulls a pistol out, a .22 pistol, and holds it at the head of the bus driver and says, "I'm hijacking this bus. You turn here on Highway 123, go to Piercetown, and then take 74 into Jasper." And that's what they did. There were 16 people on that bus, 14 women and 2 men plus the driver. And you got to remember, too, at that time, Jasper was a lot different. The junction wasn't there. Anstaff Bank wasn't there. Bob's was the only grocery store around, and it was where the feed store is now, or the annex to the feed store. The city limit to Jasper was kind of where the Dollar General is, somewhere in there. So that's what it looked like. But also, Dogpatch was in full bloom. There were hundreds, thousands of cars coming through Jasper on a regular basis, making their pilgrimage to Dogpatch. So on this day, July the 3rd, there were thousands of cars coming up and down. Jasper always looked like Memorial Weekend in terms of the number of people that were here at any given time. The restaurants were full, the motels were full. It was packed. Well, he took this bus, Keith commandeered this bus, and he parked it sideways on the Jasper Bridge so the traffic could go neither south nor north. Everything was plugged up. For miles and miles, cars were plugged up. I was sitting at my house, listening to the radio at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I guess, and they interrupt the music, local radio station, KHOZ or something. They interrupt the music and they say, "Hey, don't go to Jasper. There is an incident on the bridge. The bus is parked sideways. There are hostages." And I'm thinking, hostages in Jasper, a bus parked? You got to be kidding. This didn't seem to be very real with the serene surroundings that I had outside and that we all have experienced here as part of living and being in Newton County. Eventually, what happened after a short while, one of the deputies came out to the bus and he said, "We want to see Ray Watkins." He was the sheriff at the time. They went to get Ray, and he handed Ray a note. And this is the note. It's not actually the original note. It's one that I copied down. That he gave to Ray, listing his demands. And he said, "The world is to know the Messiah is here. Contact KY3, Jim Caldwell, or Jerry Adams, and have them come to Jasper for coverage. You have 2 hours to accomplish this. After 2 hours, we will shoot one person and one every half hour until our demands are met. If any attempts are made to come close to the bus, we have the dynamite to blow it apart. We are the witnesses spoke of in Revelations chapter 11. After we are killed this afternoon, our dead bodies are not to be tampered with, embalmed, or any other means of society's funeral rites. The bodies are to be taken to the land of the Messiah, Emery Lamb, whereupon they will lie until July the 7th, when the Spirit of life will enter them and we will stand on our feet. This demand must be met or Jasper will be destroyed. Once again, it is not our wish to hurt anyone." Yeah, really. Signed, with the kindest of thoughts, Keith Fu Hagler and Kate Fu Hagler. With that note, calls were made to KY3 News. Jim Caldwell and one of his cameramen get in a helicopter, come down here as quick as they can. State police are arriving. Cars are everywhere. To give you an idea of the scene, on the north side of the bridge is sort of a skirmish line. It's a line in which the state police cars are there, lights are flashing, marksmen have their high-powered rifles and scopes ready to do their business if need be. Nobody really knew at that point what was going to happen. There was kind of a continual line of people, not continual, but a line of people going back and forth to the bus to try to talk the Haglers out of this. Say, you don't have to do this. Just put your guns down, come on outside, everything will be okay. Nobody's been hurt. Well, there was one lady who had a heart attack, and they took her off the bus into the hospital. But nothing really bad has happened, and we'll work through this. But that was not their plan. They had a plan. Their plan was to die on that day on the bridge in Jasper, to declare a mortal person someone who they believed to be the Messiah. KY3 came out and interviewed them. I had the ability a few years later to see that tape. I was able to watch it several times. It's now used, and I just learned earlier today, this video is used nationwide among the police personnel as a way to deal with a hostage situation, and they use it in their trainings. So I was able to view that and see what actually happened there on the bridge, and KY3 talking to the Haglers and trying to get them to not do this. Ray Watkins, bless his heart, he was out there doing his very best to talk him out of it. He went down to see FOU on 2 different occasions to say, look, Emory, you got to come. These people are going to die today. You got to come down here and talk to these people and talk them out of this. His reply was, it's a police matter. There's nothing I could do anyway. And with that, once some of the hostages had been released, when KY3 first did their interview, they demanded that half the hostages, 7 of them, be released, and they were. A little later, once they released all of the hostages, Keith and Kate had tied to their hands their weapons. He had a .22 semi-automatic. She had a .38 revolver with 6 shots in it, and they are ready to step off the bridge. They were afraid that that the state police would shoot their legs out from under them. They were afraid that they would be injured and not actually die. So they had said, if they do that, we're going to save the last round for ourselves. And what happened was they stepped off the bus. You got to remember that there's a state police marksman all on the north side of the bridge, and this was almost a circus environment. There are people sitting in their lawn chairs watching this as all this is being played out. Keith and Kate step off the bus. They kneel down. They kiss each other, and they start walking on their knees toward the state police lines. The police are saying, stop, lay down your weapons, don't move. They're holding their guns up in the air like this. State police are doing everything they can to not have this happen. And then, once they begin to bring their guns down, the state police fire. They wound both of them. They fall back, they're lying on the bridge. She's more mobile than he is. She reaches over with her pistol, fires twice, and kills him. She puts the gun in her chest, kills herself. Fires once. He was declared dead dead at the scene. She was DOA at the hospital. Now, what do we take from all this? What do we take that we have this kind of beauty, and this kind of tragedy? The hostages, they were ultimately taken to a place to the hotel in Harrison, where they were debriefed and rested and allowed to go on. The Continental Trailways people put them up and made sure they made their destinations. The Haglers' bodies, as you can imagine, were not left on the bridge for 3 days in the middle of July. And so they were sent to their respective parents, one in North Carolina and the other in San Francisco. And then what happened to Emory Lamb? Emory just still didn't quite get it. He drove around Jasper for several days. He drove he had a hearse with pink hearts on it. And he drove around Jasper for several days. People were wondering, was it full of dynamite? Is he going to blow the place up? What's going to happen? So he eventually, it was my first experience with total social ostracization of anyone. People wouldn't serve him in the restaurants. People wouldn't talk to him. Businesses asked him to leave if he walked in. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. And ultimately, his family left him. All his followers left him. And after several years, he died a lonely old man by himself, or nearly by himself. People had I know this is a beautiful sunny day, but what can we take from this? What can we learn on this day and this kind of beauty from an incident that is so grave that it's just unspeakable to think, that it happens. But it happens in other places. It happens here. So I'd like to leave you with a little more of a uplifting message, but my hope is that the next two music players are going to do that for me. So I've really tried to work to how do you make this a little lighter at the end, and I haven't been very successful at bringing that about. But I know the next two musicians are going to be something you're going to really enjoy. Thank you for the afternoon. Thank you for the story.